I'm joined by Paula Peralta, who has gone from being an elite athlete to working with some of the biggest names in Australian sport by being a physiotherapist. So thanks so much for joining me, Paula.
Thanks for the invite, Abby. Really nice to be here.
So it feels like when you were a kid, it was kind of always sport, like apart from reading, but so it was how big of a part of your life was sport just at that time?
Well, growing up, I've got a brother and sister, and we were all relatively sporty. Though the other two were much more athletic, naturally athletic than me. But yeah, we always grew up playing whatever, whether it was backyard cricket, backyard tennis, tennis, lays, netball. My brother played soccer, so we pretty much played whatever was going. And then anything at school, t-ball, softball, cricket, whatever was going at school. So, and we were always really supported to do that by my parents as well. They drove us everywhere. So, it was a big part of growing up for sure.
So like you said before, netball was it felt like it was your sport, but what was it like about netball that, like, you were always playing that in the backyard?
I think because I've got an older sister, so I saw her playing it, and I was, the younger sister wanting to kind of get involved and join in. And then I think it was just team sport. Like, I've really always loved team sport and being part of a team and being part of something bigger. So that's probably what drew me to netball initially, and it was fun and I enjoyed it, and that's probably what drew me in.
Yeah, wow. So, but you ended up going to play at an elite level for a little bit, but like, was there a point where you kind of realized you were actually getting better at netball and it kind of went from, this is a fun thing that I'm doing, to like, I could become an elite player?
I remember I was probably about 13 or 14, and I'd always played multiple different positions on the court, just kind of whatever the team needed. And I was trialling for a state schoolgirls team, and I said to Mum, what position should I try out for? Because I wasn't really sure. Mum was like, oh, put down goal shooter. You're shooting well in that indoor netball team at the moment. And I was like, oh, never really shot at anything. Okay, I'll put that down. And then fast forward a month or two and I get selected in the state schoolgirls netball team as a shooter when I'd never really shot apart from club. That was probably a moment I was kind of like, oh, how did that happen? And then sort of things just kind of went from there.
So what was the kind of the jump, or what kind of happened in between from you getting selected in that team to then ending up playing for the Swifts eventually?
Yeah, so I went through state schoolgirls pathway, and then and I remember I was picked when I was younger than everybody else. So that was the first time I ever got to play with Monia Gerard.
Oh wow!
And which was really cool. And most people know Mon because she went on to do some amazing things. And then New South Wales state teams, and then I got a scholarship at the AIS for netball.
Wow!
So I went down there for 2 years and. Ironically, did my ACL as soon as I got there.
Oh, no.
But I'd already done 2 years of physio by then as well. The netball program down there back then was sort of 19 to 21.
Okay.
So, and then sort of was involved in Sandpipers, Swifts, and, so I had some really great opportunities and got some great memories from back then too.
It does sound like you had some pretty great opportunities, but like, was there ever a point where you kind of fell out of love with netball, or were you just...
No, probably not. There was times where it was hard because I was injured. I did my ACL, as I said, and then I had another surgery that resulted in another year out. Kind of at that time where you transition, I guess, from junior to senior, and it's a really critical time for athletes. So losing 2 years out of that time frame was costly, for want of a better expression. So it's not that I fell out of love with it. I was probably just frustrated and couldn't do what I wanted to do.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. But I do want to you mentioned physio before and how it kind of in those late years or early years of high school, you do kind of start to have an interest in that. But I guess kind of on that note, it feels like a lot of athletes' careers go for quite a short time and then you've got to kind of figure out what to do afterwards. So when did you kind of actually start being a physiotherapist in the first place?
Yeah, so I went straight from school into physio. And I'd finished school at 17. So I did 2 years of uni and then took up the scholarship at AIS. So I went to Canberra and I couldn't study down there. So I had to defer for 2 years and then came back and finished. So I think I was about 23 when I finished and, started working. And that was with the practice that the physios that were looking after the Swifts at the time. So that's when I started, working as a physio.
So you kind of knew that you wanted to keep being a physiotherapist, even through netball, even after netball, because I think it wasn't I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but they weren't really getting paid a lot, the athletes back then. It wasn't
No.
fully professional. So
No, that's right. I think my sign-on for the Swifts was $250 back in the
Wow.
day. So thank goodness
Oh my
it's changed,
gosh,
Abby.
yeah.
And I was one of the junior players, right? But yeah, so no, obviously always needed to kind of have a professional kind of or a plan from a work career perspective. And yeah, so we could never rely on income from netball back then, and even the highest profile players couldn't back then either.
Wow, it's amazing how much it's changed in
It's
such
so
a short
good.
time.
It's so good.
It's great that they're kind of more elite professional now, but I don't think I really actually asked you, but like what kind of drew you to physiotherapy? Like what do you actually enjoy about it? Like
I like helping people. So I think, and I like spending time with people. So just, trying to help people achieve whatever's important for them or for their goals, I really like. And just that it's really quite rewarding too, like whether it's an elite athlete or whether it's somebody that just wants to be able to pick up the kettle and make a cup of coffee. I that's probably the thing that I love most about physio.
But it feels like, because you've worked for so many like different teams, you've been on board like with the Opals recently, helping them win a bronze medal, which must have been amazing. And I want to ask about that, but it must be so cool to really be a part of that team still, and for kids also to know that they don't have to be an athlete to help a team like win a medal. Like that must be pretty cool.
Yeah, so being part of a team and our bronze medal at the Olympics was awesome, and it was a huge achievement. And we had a little bit of a complicated lead-in. We had a number of injuries, and that's no secret. So yeah, but when things come together in a team, everyone works with one common goal, and you have success. It's pretty rewarding.
Did you always kind of want to like actually work with a team? Like, because I know that you would do stuff at your own practice, but did you always want to work with a team as a physio?
Yeah, I think so. I probably didn't know if it was possible really back then. Like I always wanted to do it, and I saw other people doing it. And when I was at the AIS, I should say that all the physios down there were working at the Olympics and Com Games, and not as much Paralympics back then. But so I saw that, and I worked in the physio department, changing towels and bed sheets and those sorts of things, but I didn't really know if that was achievable for me. So, it's been great to kind of, work. And I first started netball state pathway teams as a physio and just sort of chip away and have some exposure with other sports, basketball, Paralympic sports. So, yeah, it's been good.
So would you say it is like kind of easy, like for kids if they want to get into it, or for people finishing school, like is it easy? Are the pathways good?
Probably the hardest thing is to get into physio, like I don't know what it's called anymore. Is it UAI? It's not anymore, is it? But I guess the mark has always been really high to go straight from school to physio as a degree. But there are lots of pathways now as well. You can do an undergraduate in exercise science, health science, and you can do a master's of physio. So that part's quite hard, and it's a fair bit of work. And then I guess it's starting usually at grassroots and taking opportunities and applying for things like state teams, and it does take time.
But I did want to just kind of ask as well, because I know we've spoken a bit about the Opals and you're working with them, but like if you could just kind of go through like all of the teams that you have kind of worked for, and also just kind of adjusting to, swapping with working with all of those different teams from different sports, like how's that been?
Yeah, so probably after state netball teams, I worked with the Swifts as physio for 9 years. And then during that time, I worked with the GEMS, so the Aussie Under-19s basketball team. Around that time, I worked with wheelchair basketball as well, so the Under-25s women's team. And then I covered a few clamps for the gliders, the emerging rollers, and covered the diamonds, helped Alana with the diamonds around that 2015 World Cup, did a Constellation Cup, did a tour there as well. Emerging Opals World Junior Games with basketball, Boomers for World Cup in 2019 and Tokyo, and Opals since. And then some Paralympic sports in there as well. So shooting, boccia, track and field, goalball in Tokyo. Yeah, a few other sports as well.
You've got a pretty good list of all the sports you worked with, I guess. But was it like with the Swifts, because like you said, you worked with them for so long, but was it weird going from kind of being a part of that group to then kind of being like on the sidelines and actually helping, like treating the athletes? Like, was that
That's
switch
a really
weird?
good question, Abby. So there was a little bit of time. I finished with the Swifts in 2004 as a player and still played state league for a bit till I did my other ACL, but that's another story. And then, so there'd been probably a 5-year break, and I think it probably wasn't weird for me because I'd been a physio in that time, but it was
That's
probably
true.
more weird for other people that I was no longer a player and now a physio. So it did take a little bit of time. I already had established relationships, so that was helpful. But yeah, it probably took a while for people to, I guess, see me as a physio and not an athlete.
And I did kind of want to ask about something that you mentioned and that you've mentioned before about doing your ACL a bit. And that must be, I mean, I've never been in that position, so I don't know what it's like. But do you think that kind of gives you a bit of a, not an advantage, but kind of knowing how it feels to kind of be in that injured position, then being able to help the athletes and be able to help them kind of get through that?
Yeah, I think that definitely, like, it's a level of empathy you can't really have
Yeah.
unless you've been there. And I think having been the injured athlete, having been the athlete not selected, dropped at the last minute, like all of those things, I think that definitely shapes kind of the way I practice as a physio, particularly in elite sport.
It's a really interesting, but there is something else, and I know I've asked you kind of a bit about this already, but I feel like you've been there for those really big moments, being there on the sidelines for the Opals, and the Boomers as well, also winning the gold, the bronze medal. That must have been amazing. But kind of just being with those elite athletes and being with those really good athletes and getting to hear their stories, like, does that almost give you like a new perspective of what it kind of takes to be a really elite athlete, getting to hear just what they say?
Yeah, I think I guess the thing is that they're still people at the end of the day,
Yeah.
and they're people first before athletes,
Definitely.
and I think that's a really important thing. But yeah, some of the stories and some of their experiences and the ups and downs, they're like, those stories are really unique, and they're, being part of those stories at times is quite special. So that is, I guess it's an inner sanctum thing at times. So I guess that's all part of it.
It does sound like a pretty amazing job that you have, and like, you've been able to work with so many different teams and everything. And it also feels like sport's been a pretty big part of your life. But I just want to know, what has sport been able to give you, like, just as a kid all the way through to kind of now?
Some of my closest friends and my best friends are from sport, back from when I played netball, but also from a work perspective, the touring, the trips, the tours, like the friendships and those shared experiences with people is pretty special. So I think it's definitely given me some really strong friendships that have lasted many, many years as well. I also think from a perspective that sport, it's so important from a health perspective. And so I think that, that active lifestyle, kind of being, I guess, immersed in that, just becomes part of, daily routine and life as well, which I think is great.
I imagine you're still playing sport for fun and everything, and you're still, doing a lot of exercise still.
No more netball, Abby. I haven't played in a while. Look, I don't play structured team sport. I'd love to, but I haven't in quite some time. But I love my little gym community every morning, and I did do a bit of triathlon and a half Ironman for a bit after I finished netball.
Cool.
But that's been on the back burner for a little bit. I wouldn't mind getting back and doing another triathlon, and some fun runs and that sort of thing. But my gym community is probably my favourite place at the moment.
Well, yeah, it's good that there are different communities for different stages in your life when you're doing sport and everything.
Yeah.
So happy you could have that. But one question I did ask you before the interview to kind of think about for the end was, from your own experiences, why do you think people should stay in sport?
I think sport is just, I think it's just so important. I think there's obviously health benefits, there's social benefits, and, there's strong evidence that girls drop out, in those teenage years. And I see a lot of friends now that are young mums that, find exercise and sport really challenging. I think, there's obviously the health fitness benefits, that we won't go into. But I think as well, from a connection and a community perspective, whether it's, playing a team sport one night a week, or whether it's going for a walk with friends or a bushwalk with the kids, whatever it is, it's, I think, often when it's out in the environment, like, that's kind of, you can almost say there's a mindfulness piece to that as well. So I think it's really, really important. I think we should be really encouraging young girls in particular to stay in sport. And I think that, I guess as you get older, so many of your catch-ups become quite social and often around
Yeah.
food, but it's, you know, going for a walk or getting out in nature, I think is just something that's a really good, healthy approach that we should be encouraging as well.
Well, Paula, it was so amazing to hear your perspectives and also just your stories as a physiotherapist and changing from, you know, an athlete to that. So it was so amazing. But yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Abby.